JJK 266 left us with a lot to think about, but let's just get this one out the way. Let's talk about Nobara. Spoilers beware. So as I'm sure you've seen by now, it's this final page of the chapter that reignited all of the Nobara discourse. It's this finger suspended over this spiral staircase. Now, why does this have people thinking Nobara could come back? Well, it's because of a long-running theory in the fandom that Nobara would use her straw da resonance technique on one of Sukuna's fingers in order to damage him, especially that last 20th finger that we haven't really known where it is. That felt like a plot device or a Chekhov's gun, as it were, and since Nobara has a technique that could uniquely interact with it, people always thought that that may be what she's going to come back into the story to do, especially given how her fate was left so vague for so long. Now, I know you might be saying, what does this have to do with Nobara and why is this important? Because we already knew that that 20th finger existed out there, because we know that Gojo hid one of the fingers away in order to stay Yuji's execution. This is why Sukuna ate his mummified corpse in order to get back to full power. Well, it's important because we were led to believe, alongside Sukuna, that Yuta/Rika had eaten that last finger, and that's how he copied Cleave and Dismantle, right? But if you go back to that chapter, that is just Sukuna's best guess as to what happened. It is never explicitly stated that that's what's happened. So now, in these final moments of the chapter, with Sukuna going to cast the domain expansion, it's in that moment that he senses that finger and realizes that it's still out there. And something like that treated as a revelation, as a surprise in a story like this at the 11th hour implies something is going to happen with that finger, right? And again, Nobara's curse technique can uniquely do something to that finger. But is that on its own enough to think that Nobara is coming back? Maybe, maybe not, but where it gets really interesting is when we take a look at this official Avant music video. Go check it out if you've never seen it. It contains so much symbolism, it's absolutely crazy. I won't even scratch the surface of it here, but I'm just going to show you two examples to, let you see what I'm talking about. Up here, we have a fish that has been chopped up, and this fish also happens to have 6 eyes. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then these two, but on the other side, right? So this fish is clearly representative of Gojo. And we know that Sukuna compared him to a fish on his cutting board that he was going to remove the scales of. And then, of course, he had his 50% discount, right? And then down here, this clearly evokes Sukuna's domain, the one that he had to kind of string together with binding vows that had all of the eyes and was monstrous, right? These are the mouths on the bottom of his domain, and all of these eyes evoke that for me. And this video came out far before we ever saw that version of Sukuna's domain. And again, is this exactly what it looked like? No, but neither is Gojo a literal fish. I think this was definitely alluding to that. Now take a look at some of the other symbolism surrounding Nobara that was in that video. Here we have a finger literally held together by a rope. Now, it's not the exact same as that finger held together by all of the strings over the spiral staircase, but it certainly evokes that, right? And then we have the nail, just like with her hammer and resonance technique. And then this one is super fascinating. A nail with Sukuna's eyes like focused on it. Is it fear? Is it surprise? Could this be leading to this kind of pivotal moment in the final act where Nobara comes back and uses soul resonance on Sukuna? Maybe. Now, I do say maybe because while this is possible, there are some very interesting pieces on the board. I don't think it has to happen. I think Nobara could indeed be truly gone, and this finger could be utilized in some other way in this final act here, right? That's entirely possible. So don't get your hope meters up too high. But again, I just thought this was too interesting not to share. And that's not even to mention the implications of if she did come back in light of the one will live or one will die ending. Now, I'm going to assume you guys know what I'm talking about there. I've put out a couple of videos on it, but essentially, Gege said that at the end of JJK, of Nobara, Megumi, Yuji, and Gojo, either one of them will die, 3 will live, or 3 will die and only 1 will live. If Nobara comes back, that throws a big wrench into the possibilities, right? Because if she's alive and she's the only one that's gonna live, then that means it's lights out for Megumi and Yuji, right? Or maybe it means that she, Megumi, and Yuji live and Gojo is the only one to pass away. Or, because I really think Yuji isn't going to make it out of this manga alive, especially considering, you know, what Kenjaku said about as long as Yuji and Sukuna are around, the cycle of curses will never end. So if Nobara is alive and we know that Yuji is going to go bye-bye, then that may paint a way for Gojo to come back. And it'd be Nobara, Megumi, and Gojo that live and Yuji that dies. So we're not going to get too in the weeds on this. All that to say is that if Nobara is alive, that means some very interesting possibilities for that ending theory. And then just to play devil's advocate here, I do need to mention that it is possible that this isn't that 20th finger. Now, for my money right now, I do think that it is. I think it's that last finger that Gojo hid away, right? But considering the events of this chapter, how they played out, that Yuji's gauntlet was destroyed, it's revealed that he's missing 2 fingers, and then it's then and only then that Sukuna realizes this, is a little bit sus. So this could be something else. It could be something that Yuji did with one of his fingers. It could be some product of his domain. Those things are at least possible. So I do wanted to mention that, but I, again, think that this probably is that 20th finger, which then begs another question of how did Yuta copy, cleave, and dismantle, right? Well, if staircase finger is the 20th finger, then we still have a couple of ways for Yuta to have copied, cleave, and dismantle. First and foremost, he might have copied it from Yuji himself. You got to remember that they body swapped with each other during that month time skip, so they would be very familiar with one another. And even though Yuji had not awakened Shrine yet, considering he did that after hitting the black flashes during the fight with Sukuna, Shrine was still very likely already engraved on his body at that point, something that Yuta could have recognized. So even though the technique wasn't accessible to Yuji yet, Yuta still could have potentially copied it from him by having Rika consume part of him, potentially even the fingers that he's missing that we see at the end of the chapter, right? However, that's not the only way, because you also got to remember that when Sukuna was fighting Higuruma and he got stabbed with the executioner's sword, Sukuna cleaved off his own hand in order to survive that, right? That hand, presumably sitting on the battlefield, maybe Rika went over there and gobbled it up, right? And in fact, Sukuna has taken a lot of injuries, so there may even be other times where she could have gotten some and he copied it in that moment. But I think that hand would be the most likely culprit if this was how. And then finally, this is a little bit less likely, but still possible. Maybe Rika doesn't have to consume that much of someone to copy the technique. So maybe she even just took a little bit of a nibble on staircase finger. But I do think that's the least likely. Anyways, that's all for this one. I still have a lot to talk about for this chapter, but it will be in different videos. For now, let me know y'all's thoughts on this. I don't think it has to happen, but I do think it would be extremely hype just because that would mean we have Yuji, Megami helping from within Sukuna, like we saw in this chapter, and Nobara teaming up as the original trio to take this beast down, and that would be extremely poetic. But anyways, let me know y'all's thoughts, and I'll see you soon.